You just presented earlier about the state of everything, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big things is that we're only a week out from the general election in the UK, and I'm curious for your opinion on what that means for the media industry, regardless of who wins, or if you're presuming, let's say, Labour wins, what that might mean.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it certainly seems like the Labour Party is going to have a significant majority going forward. Be a real big shock if that wasn't what happened. But I think their manifesto is fairly light on policy specifics. And actually, when you add it up, it's a net policy investment of about $10 billion, which in the context of a $3 trillion economy isn't a huge amount of money. So I think our current best view is that actually a new government, although fresh, isn't really going to significantly change the economic outlook. So, the UK economy is on a bit of an upswing, but from a very low base. Maybe at best it's going to grow by about 1% in real terms this year, and that's going to go up to 1.5–2% perhaps. Still short of Keir Starmer's 2.5% expectations. Obviously, the economic growth is massively important to the media industry, and so it's good that it's on an upward swing. But we have to be realistic that the kind of the midterm outlook is still relatively muted, and probably unless the Labour government comes out with some real big shocks once they're in office, they're probably not going to be able to do much to kind of change that. Partly because the debt level is very high in the UK, so they probably can't borrow too much more, and they've already ruled out significant tax increases. So to invest more to kickstart the economy, they're going to have to shift their view on either one or both of those, so either higher taxes or more borrowing.
And what's then the sort of downstream impact on media? Because if businesses if there's less money going around and growth is relatively mild, are we looking at sort of business as usual going forward, or what's the opportunity from the media industry specifically, and how businesses spend on advertising?
Yeah, I mean, the economy is growing a bit. I think one of the issues we've got is people are not feeling it so much in their pockets right now, because we still need a year or two to work through higher interest rates into mortgages and into rent. So I think it probably is a little bit business as usual, but I think generally, with a kind of a blank piece of paper with a new government, maybe there'll be some underlying optimism. I think it's definitely businesses should be trying to get into perhaps a more positive mindset and looking for investment opportunities. If interest rates do start to come down, that makes it easier to make those investment decisions. So I think, in the near term, maybe business as usual, but I think definitely start priming yourself for better growth midterm.
What do agencies need to do to better compete against each other? I mean, you have these big holding companies, and you also have a few challengers. Given the current state of the economy, where do you see them sort of moving in the next year or two?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen, certainly from a revenue growth perspective, is the agencies fall into three camps. Leader of the pack, by far and away, Publicis, and they've been able to achieve that because they made big, bold M&A bets in technology and in data. And whilst the other agencies talk a game on technology and data, the investments have been more organic. So it's a bit of an evolution of their kind of traditional ad agency business, which is very cyclical. So if you want to get breakout growth, you need a breakout strategy, and that needs a big commitment. And I think M&A is the way you need to do it. And it needs to be around technology and data. The interesting one right now is Dentsu, which is going through a big transformation. I think it's the right strategy they've got. It's a copycat to a degree of Publicis, but they need to spend more money against it to really get the transformation they're looking for. And then the other, obviously, the big interest in the agency world right now is what's going to happen with Havas, which is likely to get spun out of Vivendi next year. What they do as an independent company is going to be very interesting, and whether they themselves become a target for another agency or perhaps a tech company that wants to strengthen that kind of integrated proposition.
You mentioned tech companies. You also talk about tech companies a lot. There's a lot of uncertainty around all of the big tech companies, it seems like. Google, Apple, Twitter, of course, X. And TikTok, of course, in the U.S. as well, with the potential ban. So is that uncertainty weighing at all on advertising spend?
I guess in terms of actual advertising spend at the moment, the answer is no, because we're seeing, all of the big agencies talking about quite healthy growth and actually upgrading their forecast this year. But they do pose very big questions for where ad spend might go to going forward. So, TikTok obviously facing this US ban, where do you put your ad spend in the US if there's no more TikTok with 180 million active users? Obviously, one of the questions there is whether the Twitter/X can fill that vacuum, and obviously Elon Musk last week in Cannes trying to kind of really reposition the company and rebuild bridges with the advertising community. I guess there's a question there about whether how people use the platform through the elections still raises questions for advertisers about brand safety. So that's going to be an interesting place to watch, that transition of ad spend away from TikTok perhaps towards X. And then Google, partly they need to revamp their Gen AI strategy so they protect that 80% plus share of search that they've got, which is crucial to their ad spend. And then Apple, which could essentially define the generative AI category for the consumer. They've just launched their Apple Intelligence proposition. That will become real with the launch of the iPhone 16, probably September time. And as we saw, the original iPhone essentially created the smartphone category and the app economy and Instagram and everything else that's come from that. And I think you could potentially see the same with the iPhone 16, that Gen AI capabilities in an iPhone is what kickstarts that economy, which creates lots of opportunity and questions for advertisers and media owners about how they monetize that opportunity. Because I think it's going to change the way consumers interact with technology and the content that's shown to them over the next decade.
Do you think AI is overhyped at all, or is some of it, as you sort of say, like very real that we could be seeing serious business changing?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of hype. Whether it's overhyped or it's hard to say. I think, definitely at Cannes last week, there's a lot of talk about things that seem very familiar now, using generative AI to create content, and that's evolving. But the wider use cases of it, this kind of idea that it's going to take jobs away and massively transform how the marketing workflow evolves, I think it's still up for debate. I think a lot of CMOs are not so clear about how these products are actually going to, kind of become kind of mainstream within their organizations. They're kind of doing lots of proof of concepts, but I think we need to see much clearer, well-defined applications for it to kind of really kickstart there.
If you like this video, please subscribe. The Media Leader is the UK's leading source of analysis, opinion and data for people who work in advertising and media.